Weekly Spooky is brought to you by our generous supporters on Patreon. Get access to exclusive podcasts, videos, and more for as little as $1 a month when you go to WeeklySpooky.com and click on the Patreon link. Your support has gotten us to 100 episodes, so join up today and help us create another 100 and beyond. Head over to WeeklySpooky.com and join the Patreon.
What's that? You want to be scared? Come with me. You will experience tales of horror, ghosts, and death. It is not recommended for the weak at heart. Listen in the dark. It's more fun that way. This is Weekly Spooky.
It's Wednesday, and you know what that means? It's time for a little spooky in your weekly. I'm your host and narrator, Henrik Kuto, and today is a big day. Today is the final installment of Prom Queen Killer, Weekly Spooky's first ever mini-series. And boy, what a finale it's going to be. But first, I want to take just a moment and wish one of our fans a speedy recovery, as Amber Hansford will be going into surgery tomorrow. Amber, we here at Weekly Spooky wish you all of the best, as well as a very speedy recovery. If you want to be a great fan like Amber, why not take a moment to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcasting app? And maybe leave us a little star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I know a lot of you listen to us on Spotify, and now there is an option to rate your favorite podcasts. So throw us a big fat 5 stars, and I assure you, it helps the show immensely. And if you're really into helping the program, you can go to WeeklySpooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can become a supporter of the show and get all kinds of exclusive content, including some exclusive vlogs I'll be doing from my writing retreat up in the cold forests of Michigan. If that doesn't sound like the beginning of a horror story, I don't know what does. But speaking of a horror story, I think it's about time we wrap up the terror that has been unleashed in Strickfield, Ohio, as we find out not only who is the Prom Queen Killer, but why they're painting this small town red with blood. So let's get to it right now, after a quick word from this week's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Manscaped. Cheers to 2022 and the resolutions you can actually keep. How about upgrading your grooming routine for the new year? Manscaped are here to make the ball drop into 2022 the cleanest ever. Join the 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Go to manscaped.com and use code SPOOKY20 for 20% off and free shipping. I just received a late Christmas gift from the fine folks at Manscaped. It included their new ultra premium shampoo, conditioner, and body wash. Many of you may not know, but I have hair past my shoulders, and their shampoo conditioner had a delightful scent of fresh tea and citrus that I really enjoyed, and my hair was soft to the touch. The body wash was rugged, but not in a perfume cologne scent kind of way, and the natural sea salt helped make scrubbing excellent. Whether you're getting the lawnmower to trim down there, the weed whacker to control your nose hairs, or one of their men-focused deodorants or shampoos, all of their excellent and hilariously named products are a perfect gift for yourself or that man in your life. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code SPOOKY20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code SPOOKY20. It's new year, new me in 2022 with Manscaped. Now, on with the story. Previously on Prom Queen Killer. 2 years after a horrible accident left her brother disfigured, Laura Lee and her mother are living in Strickfield. Laura Lee is a senior at Strickfield High School and living a good life until she gets nominated for prom queen. Immediately after, she's confronted by Taylor Mirren, another nominee and the frontrunner, who plans to win the senior prom queen crown at any cost. Later that night, Laura Lee receives an email from her older brother, Aiden, saying that he's coming for her very soon. Taylor Mirren has a way of bringing people's secrets out into the open and utilizes this advantage to force two of her competitors out of the running for senior prom queen. However, after Randy Robinson and Ellen Franks were officially out of the running, they were horribly murdered in separate incidents. Many suspect Taylor Mirren of being the mastermind behind the deaths. Or could it be Laura Lee's estranged brother? The killer seems one step closer to reaching Laura Lee when she goes to see Misty at her house, but finds her girlfriend's slain body waiting for her, and a bloody message: soon. Shortly after Misty's death, Laura Lee finds herself entering into a forbidden relationship with her late girlfriend's sister, Cheryl. Later that night, Aiden attacks Laura Lee, leaving her injured, but alive. Cheryl becomes convinced Taylor Mirren is behind the murders, including that of her younger sister. At the prom, Laura Lee and Cheryl come together as a couple. Taylor Mirren leaves the prom for a moment, only to be confronted by Aiden. The two of them fight, but Taylor is brought to Aiden's mercy as he prepares to kill her. And now, the conclusion to Prom Queen Killer. Saturday night, prom night. As Aiden Hardy brought the knife down on Taylor Mirren, she screamed and punched his throat. He gagged and knew he had no choice but to get off her. Holding his throat and gasping for breath, he ran as fast as he could. Taylor tried chasing him, but she felt pain in her left side and was bleeding out. "God damn it," she moaned. She quickly made her way to a restroom and went in. She grabbed a bunch of paper towels. Next, she pulled off her sleeves and tied them together. She put the paper towels on her wound and wrapped the sleeves around her waist. She tied the sleeves tightly together and hoped this emergency procedure would stop the bleeding. Suddenly, the door opened. Cheryl Blint came in and saw Taylor topless and bloody. The two girls just looked at each other. When Taylor saw Cheryl couldn't take her eyes off her naked breasts, she faced her and presented herself. "You like?" Taylor purred. Cheryl turned away quickly. "Shit, sorry." Taylor laughed. "Bullshit. Remember, I know you like girls." Cheryl glared at Taylor. "Not you, I fucking hate you." Taylor grinned devilishly. "But you'd gladly fuck me in a heartbeat if I gave you the opportunity." She raised her finger. "And don't you fucking tell me you wouldn't." She changed the subject. "Your girlfriend's fucking maniac brother's here. As you can see, he attacked me." "So you two aren't in this shit together?" Cheryl ascertained. Taylor became upset. "Fuck you, bitch!" She pointed at Cheryl. "What's that sweater worth to you?" Cheryl looked at her in disgust. "I'm not giving you my goddamn sweater. Fuck you." Taylor grinned. "Fine. Keep looking at my titties then, pervert." Cheryl groaned and relinquished her sweater. Taylor snatched it, put it on, and quickly buttoned it up. "Thanks, babe," Taylor said. "I'll compensate you for it later." Just then, the door opened again. Cheryl and Taylor turned to see Laura Lee. Cheryl pulled Laura Lee into her arms. "Honey, are you okay? Where were you?" Laura Lee hugged her back. "I'm sorry. I got scared after that explosion and I hid in a classroom. I think I fell asleep or passed out. Did I miss anything?" "No," Taylor answered for Cheryl. "I haven't been crowned senior prom queen yet." She looked at her smartwatch. "That's in about an hour." Laura Lee became angry and tore away from Cheryl. "Give the sweater back." "It's okay, Laura Lee. I gave it to her," Cheryl said. "Actually, I'm just renting it from her," Taylor corrected. My dress was practically destroyed by... She raised an eyelid. Your brother, is it? Taylor looked at the couple for a moment. You know what? I think we three should go and talk in private. Yeah, I've got some delicious dainties I want to share with you two. Things you'll want to know about. Laura Lee was still angry. Fuck you, Taylor. You want the senior prom queen crown so bad? Just take the fucking thing and shove it straight up your ass. Taylor laughed. Oh, I love your spunk, honey, but no, it's not about blackmailing the two of you to give up the crown. I told you, the crown's mine. I'm Taylor Mirren. End of fucking story. She motioned to the door. Come on, let's go into an empty classroom where we can be alone. Laura Lee and Cheryl reluctantly obeyed Taylor. Soon the three of them entered one of the many empty classrooms. Taylor pulled the door closed and turned on the lights. Unless other people are planning to roam the halls, I'd say we've got all the privacy we need, Taylor said. What do you want, Taylor? Laura Lee snapped. Taylor clasped her hands together. Yes, what do I want? She went and sat on the teacher's desk. I want to get something off my busty chest, and I don't mean Cheryl's sweater. You see, something's been really bothering me. Taylor pointed to Cheryl. We all know what your big skeleton is, don't we? Cheryl was frustrated. Okay, yes, I'm fucking gay, just like Misty. I've been in love with Laura Lee ever since Misty and I met her. Misty was out, but I wasn't. Misty didn't even know about me. She got with Laura Lee before I could come out to her. I let things go because Misty was my sister. I'd say I'm out now, so you don't really have any leverage against me, do you? Taylor shook her head slowly. Okay, you both came together, you danced together, but that doesn't mean the school population knows you are together. Your secret, it's safe with me. As long as you get the senior crown, right? Cheryl emphasized. Fuck the goddamn crown, Taylor snapped. Look, I totally get it. I'm the worst fucking human being you'll ever meet. She glanced down at her side. Getting stabbed a little bit ago made me really see shit. Cheryl, when I told you I've killed people, I meant that I've ruined people's lives. I've ended a lot of dreams. I never murdered anyone in my life. Then what about when I fell into your yard last night? Cheryl demanded. You had blood on you. I'm a hunter, Taylor replied. My dad taught me how to hunt animals for food. I'd just caught a couple of rabbits on my property and was preparing them. Yes, rabbits are out of season, but my property. The point I'm trying to make here is that I've already prided myself on being the hunter and everybody else the hunted. I exploit people to get what I want. Taylor pointed to Laura Lee. But your brother wanted to exploit me tonight. Your brother wanted to take my fucking life. Your brother was way more ruthless than I could ever be. Yes, I'm a ruthless cunt. No, I'm not a killer. Aiden really opened my eyes and made me see that I don't want to ever resort to murder to get what I want. So I'm turning over a new leaf. I don't want to exploit people anymore, and I want to help stop Aiden before he kills again. Laura Lee and Cheryl both looked at each other in disbelief. Then they turned back to Taylor. Bullshit, Cheryl challenged. Rebecca Mirren, your cousin, is the only good Mirren in your family. People call her Charity, and for good reason. You expect us to believe you're going to be just like Charity? Yes, Taylor replied quickly. I'm not kidding here. Aiden made me feel so vulnerable tonight. I truly understand now how I made people feel when I exploited them. And I want to make things right. I'm going to find and stop Aiden. I know he's still here in the school, somewhere. See, I'm a loose end. He's not leaving until he finishes me off. Taylor pointed to Laura Lee. Figuring out Cheryl's skeleton was easy peasy, but yours was quite the challenge. In fact, the most challenging. Me? How? Laura Lee asked. I always make it a point to know my enemies very well, Taylor explained. It's how I find their skeletons. Like I said, finding yours was truly challenging. Obviously, I couldn't have exposed you for being gay because you were already out and in a relationship with Misty. Again, you and Cheryl being a couple is completely safe with me. What I want to talk about is your accident in Shore City more than 2 years ago. Cheryl spoke up. Laura Lee told me about that. Taylor produced a smartphone. Lose something, Laura Lee? Laura Lee's eyes widened. You fucking bitch, give that back. As Laura Lee came at Taylor, she moved and got behind the teacher's desk. Taylor quickly opened the lock screen. You know, Laura Lee, ever since you were nominated for Senior Prom Queen, I've been watching you. I've heard you mention your mother, and yet I've never once seen her. Are you sure you told Cheryl everything? Shut the fuck up, Taylor, Cheryl yelled. Yeah, this is really turning over a new leaf. Bullshit. Taylor glanced at Cheryl. Have you ever seen Laura Lee's mom? Did Misty? I know I haven't, and you know what? Nobody ever will. She looked back at Laura Lee, whose jaw was tightened now. It took some time, but I finally found your biggest skeleton. It's huge. First, there were newspaper articles from 2 years ago regarding an automobile accident on I-71 you were involved in, back when you lived in Shore City. I told you, Taylor. Laura Lee told me about the accident, Cheryl insisted. Taylor kept her eyes on Laura Lee. Again, Cheryl, did she tell you everything? Did she tell you that her mother and brother both died in that accident? What? Cheryl choked. Don't believe me? I emailed the Shore City newspaper articles to you, Cheryl. You can read them later, Taylor said. You'll see I'm not lying. But I dug deeper. Laura Lee, did you tell Cheryl you had official records that were sealed because you were underage? You survived the accident. You alone survived the accident. Taylor narrowed her eyes. However, the accident was only the beginning of. Laura Lee tightened her jaw again and both her fists. Leave me alone, Taylor. God damn you. Cheryl was about to get up and join her, but Taylor pointed to her. I do have a point here. Now I know Laura Lee didn't tell you everything. I can see it on her. In fact, Laura Lee, you've just shown me way more than you should have. Taylor pointed to the door. Leave, Cheryl. Go call the police right fucking now. Cheryl pointed a shaky finger at Taylor. Oh, I'll call them all right. I'll tell them to come here and arrest you. Taylor's eyes were still locked on Laura Lee. Just fucking call them already, Cheryl. I don't care what you tell them. Go. Cheryl looked scared as Taylor produced the knife she had been stabbed with. Cheryl quickly turned and ran out of the classroom, her smartphone in hand. Taylor turned her attention back to Laura Lee. You know what the police are going to arrest you for, honey? Murder 1, probably by insanity in your case. And I can prove every bit of it. Ah, there you are, tightening your jaw for me again. You know, that's exactly how your, she made air quotes, brother looked right at me when we fought, but we both know your mother and brother are quite dead. Yeah, it took a little money and a few topless selfies, but I was able to get unsealed copies of Ellen Frank's records. And yours. Ellen Franks did some time in Erie City Asylum. And so did you. Apparently you came down with multiple personality disorder. According to your records, you felt so guilty about your brother and mother being killed that day that you just couldn't leave it alone. You felt you had to keep your family alive by any means necessary. In fact, you even killed some people after getting that plate in your head. I'm sure it was you, because you wouldn't have had the time to develop personalities for your mother and brother. Yeah, you went through therapy, but did you really want to be helped? You know what really sealed the deal when it came to you, Laura Lee? When Aiden and I fought earlier, even through your mask and wig, you tightened your jaw. It's tightened the very same way right now. Also, I kicked Aiden in the balls, except for one thing. Aiden never felt any pain. Trust me, when you kick a guy hard in the balls, I don't give a goddamn how bad you think you are, you're going down. Except, you don't have balls. Right, Laura Lee? Taylor waved Laura Lee's smartphone. I easily lifted this and hacked your passcode. I've seen you call and talk to your mom. But when I looked through your call history, all I could see was nothing but the Strickfield temperature line. For each and every call you made. The only calls you actually received were from Misty or Cheryl. I even found a few emails supposedly from Aiden. It wasn't hard to trace those emails back to another account, which is actually right here on your phone. So one more time, Laura Lee, are you sure you told Cheryl the whole story about your accident? Laura Lee had her head bowed and her eyes closed. Finally, she opened them and roared with anger, only now her voice sounded more like the deeper one of Aiden. You fucking bitch, I'll kill you once and for all. Taylor hadn't expected Laura Lee to pull out her original knife and swing hard. She nearly caught Taylor on her unhurt side, but Taylor blocked Laura Lee with her knife. She quickly dropped the knife, put her hands on the desk, and brought her feet up over it to dropkick Laura Lee away. When Taylor came back down, she groaned when she felt pain in her injured side. She picked the knife back up and came out from behind the teacher's desk, prepared to continue her fight with Laura Lee. Laura Lee again spoke in Aiden's voice. My sister has a truly sick mind, Taylor scoffed. You're telling me. Laura Lee swung the knife. My sister's a sick lesbian pervert, and I ain't letting her marry another girl. Randy Robinson secretly did pornography with other girls. Who was to say she wouldn't have taken a liking to my sister? Ellen Franks dated Misty before Misty broke up with her to be with Laura Lee, but I ended their perversion, didn't I? As for Cheryl, I made a mess of her house twice. First her sister, then her fake boyfriend. Taylor gave Laura Lee a gleeful smile and pointed back. Laura Lee, as Aiden, hadn't counted on Cheryl returning to the classroom after calling the police. Cheryl had seen and heard most of Taylor's revelations, but she didn't fully see Laura Lee become Aiden and hear the entire conversation. Laura Lee roared and raised the knife as she ran at Cheryl. Cheryl screamed and ran back out into the hallway. She quickly kicked her shoes off and ran barefoot back to the prom. She could hear Laura Lee running easily on her heels. You can't escape, she heard Aiden declare. You ain't leaving this school alive. Cheryl couldn't believe that Laura Lee was catching up to her, but Cheryl finally made it back to the gym and walked into the prom. Cheryl tried to lose herself among the other dancing students. However, once Laura Lee entered the gym, she easily spotted her. Laura Lee made the students panic for the second time that night when she raised her knife and went at Cheryl. The music suddenly stopped, and many of the students ran to try and escape. Laura Lee stabbed and killed many students. When a boyfriend pushed his girlfriend into Laura Lee, she immediately grabbed her by the hair and slashed her throat. The boyfriend's efforts to selfishly save himself were futile as Laura Lee caught up to him, turning the boyfriend around as she stuck him and opened him up. When the boyfriend fell over, his guts spilled onto the dance floor. Cheryl approached Laura Lee from behind with a folding chair and slammed it into her back. She went down, but surprised Cheryl at how quickly she was back on her feet. You gotta do better than that, bitch, Laura Lee growled, still talking in Aiden's voice. Cheryl tried hitting Laura Lee with the chair again, but she knocked it away from her. She grabbed Cheryl's gown and prepared to stab her. Suddenly, Taylor lunged at Laura Lee and took her down. When they got up and faced each other, Taylor did a spinning martial arts kick and caught Laura Lee in the stomach to send her onto her back again. You're done here, you sick fuck, Taylor hissed. Your big mistake was not killing me when you had a chance. But I promise you, you won't get another opportunity. Laura Lee got back up and the two girls went at each other like wolves. Though Taylor was showing signs of bleeding from her knife wound again, she would stop Aiden even if it meant her own life. Many people had died because Laura Lee wanted to keep her family together. As far as Taylor was concerned, Laura Lee's, or Aiden's, reign of terror would end with her. At one point during the fight, Taylor disarmed Laura Lee. Cheryl glared at Laura Lee with both horror and betrayal etched on her face. When she saw the knife on the floor, she moved and picked it up. She watched as Taylor and Laura Lee continued to fight. It seemed that the Aiden personality had learned from his earlier mistakes with Taylor, because he finally saw an opening and kicked Taylor hard enough to send her into a corner on her back. Taylor was weak from blood loss and wasn't sure she was going to be able to finish this fight on her terms. However, she saw Cheryl approaching Laura Lee with the knife and quickly ripped open the sweater, making the buttons fly in different directions. As Aiden got an eyeful of Taylor's ample breasts, Cheryl stabbed Laura Lee right in the stomach. "This is for Misty, you fucking bitch," Cheryl yelled. Laura Lee grimaced with pain and fell to the floor. Taylor forced herself to stand up. But the Aiden personality still wouldn't relent. Laura Lee got back to her feet for one last attack. On Cheryl. "If I'm dying, I'm taking you with me, dyke." Taylor felt ready to pass out, but she forced herself to stand up and face Laura Lee. "Hey, Aiden, asshole," Taylor called out. Laura Lee turned and saw Taylor was wobbling. Laura Lee moved to Taylor, pulling the knife out of her stomach. But Taylor was ready. "Remember my name, you son of a bitch. Taylor motherfucking Mirren." And she quickly brought her foot up and caught Laura Lee hard under the chin. She fell onto her back and smacked her head on the floor even harder, busting her open and making her bleed fast. Taylor's eyes rolled up into her head, and she passed out. Laura Lee moaned as her own personality returned. When she saw Cheryl looking down at her, she softly cried. Cheryl shook her head slowly. "I fucking hate you." Then Cheryl picked up Laura Lee's knife. She dropped to her knees and stabbed Laura Lee repeatedly until she was finally dead. It was then when the police finally arrived and eased Cheryl away from Laura Lee's body. The paramedics came in and would wheel Taylor out to take her to Strickfield General Hospital. Laura Lee's body would be taken to the hospital morgue. Laura Lee's, or Aiden's, reign of terror had finally come to an end. As far as who won both the junior and senior class prom queen crowns, the winners were never announced. Nearly all the surviving students fled the junior and senior prom, making it a bust. Epilogue. Cheryl Blint visited Taylor Mirren at Strickfield General Hospital. Cheryl still wasn't sure how she felt about Taylor, even after this hated Mirren had saved her life and helped stop Laura Lee. If anything, Cheryl felt she should at least visit her at the hospital and see if she was okay. Much to Cheryl's surprise, Taylor was glad to see her. Taylor wasn't in the hospital for more than a day, since all she needed were some stitches and blood transfusions. After Taylor was back at school on Monday, Cheryl and Taylor found themselves talking to each other more, until they realized they liked each other and became friends. In fact, many of the other students at Strickfield High couldn't believe the sudden change in Taylor. She wasn't exploiting people for her own personal benefit anymore. She had even given financial compensation to the families of Randy Robinson and Ellen Franks for all the trouble she'd caused the girls in life. As for Laura Lee Hardy, she continued to weigh heavily on Taylor and Cheryl. The girls both attended Laura Lee's funeral in Shore City. In fact, they were the only ones there. Taylor paid for Laura Lee's funeral and made sure she had a decent burial near her parents. Cheryl still felt hatred for Laura Lee over the death of Misty, but she agreed with Taylor that Laura Lee should be at peace. Also, neither girl was ever arrested or charged for killing Laura Lee. After the funeral, when the girls were alone at Laura Lee's grave, Cheryl said her piece. "I know you had problems, Laura Lee, but you killed my sister, you killed Misty, and I'll never forgive you for that. Never." 2 years later, Taylor and Cheryl were attending Strickfield University. Even though they would never be able to forget Laura Lee Hardy, or the Prom Queen Killer as she infamously became known, they did feel they owed Laura Lee for bringing them together. They had become friends at the end of high school, but their bond of friendship evolved into something deeper. Taylor invited Cheryl to move in with her shortly after they started dating. Upon graduating from Strickfield University, they got married. The memory of Laura Lee Hardy stayed with Taylor and Cheryl. However, the story of Laura Lee and her family came to become one of today's urban legends often told around campfires, around Halloween, and in Strickfield, always on prom night. Well, that's one hell of an ending, my friends. I hope you enjoyed our first, and possibly not last, mini-series here on Weekly Spooky, and we want to hear from you. We want to know if you enjoyed this type of storytelling, and if you'd like to see some more multi-part episodes in the future. Our current format of standalone stories every week is not going anywhere, but perhaps this could be a fun way to change things up every now and then. So send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com or comment on YouTube, comment on Patreon. Let us know, did you enjoy Prom Queen Killer, and do you want to see some more 4-parters in the future? And if you love what we do here at Weekly Spooky, the best way to support us is to go to weeklyspooky.com and join our Patreon for as little as $1 a month, and you'll get exclusive perks for your trouble, including some video blogs that I'm going to be recording while I'm up in the wilds of snowy Michigan next week. In fact, I leave tomorrow. I'm going to be going on a writing retreat to finally, conclusively nail down the rewrite of a film called Babysitter Massacre 2, which, if you don't know about it, don't worry, you'll hear plenty about it in the near future. And speaking of Patreon, I want to take a moment to thank our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little extra to hear their names on the show. That's Christopher Sullivan, Gino Lyons, Karen Ouimet, Jack Kerr, Jeff and George Hilton, Craig Cohen, and Kevin Fry. Thank you all so much. We're at 83 Patreon backers right now. Can you help us get to 100? If Patreon isn't your thing, though, you can go to weeklyspooky.com and click on store and get exclusive merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, even some exclusive Prom Queen Killer merchandise is sitting there waiting for you. So head to weeklyspooky.com for everything you could ever need. But now I need to start packing, so for our executive producer Rob Fields, our producer Dan Wilder, and our composer Ray Mattis, I will talk at you later.
Thank you for listening. Make sure to find your way back next week. But for now, you are safe. Trust me.